Hey everyone, how's it going? Hope you're doing good, and appreciate you connecting here. Listen, want to just share some things with you this afternoon that have been turning over in me. And earlier today, Lord just kind of spoke something into me that I feel like many people are really dealing with right now, and so I sense to share it with you. There's a stirring that's been happening today, so. I want to share it with you in terms of criticism, and I want to just talk for a few minutes about having to press through the winds of criticism. It's going to be my assumption that pretty much everybody watching this at some point is going to be familiar with the account of David when he went to fight Goliath. One of the things that, we focus on David beating Goliath, but in the book of 1 Samuel 17. The scriptures talk about how David had to really press through criticism, specifically the criticism of his oldest brother and the criticism of King Saul. And so I want to speak to that because God dropped a word in me earlier today that I really feel like is timely. And so it's been stirring and turning over in me all day. On Wednesday nights, for those of you that don't know this, usually on Wednesday nights we do a live stream on our YouTube channel, but I really felt today to put this on YouTube. So I'm actually going to, or here on Facebook, so I'm actually going to share something that God downloaded into me, and then I want to talk to you about navigating the winds of criticism. Every one of us deal with it, but I'm talking about something right now in terms of a strategic preemptive strike of your enemy to attempt to try to mess you up, to try to block you, to try to deal with you in terms of messing up where God is about to take you. I'm talking to people right now. You're getting ready to experience some breakthroughs that you have been pressing toward, pardon me, for a long time. And all of a sudden, there has just been these swirling winds of criticism. I'm not talking about, normal criticism. I'm talking about stuff that has just really tried to shake you. And here's what God said, and I'm actually going to read it because I want to get this. Quote, there are people, hear what the word of the Lord is for you. There are people pressuring you to step outside of your lane. Don't you dare do it. People are pressuring you through criticism to get you to move out of your lane. And God began to talk to my heart about this today as it relates to it being a preemptive strike. Your adversary is really trying to mess you up to get you to miss God. And by that, it's in the sense that their criticism is intended to try to talk you out of some things. And so how do you deal with that? Well, first of all, the interesting thing that you need to be aware of is that David, in 1 Samuel 17, had to deal with the criticism of his oldest brother, and he asked him, who do you think you are? And so some of you today, you're dealing with that. There is a sense of you're stepping up and you're beginning to move forward in dreams and purposes, in some convictions that you carry deep on the inside of you. Some ideas, some plans that have been formulated. You've prepared your way and you're beginning to move forward in some things. And there are significant voices. See, that's the interesting thing about David's oldest brother and then eventually King Saul. I'm going to show you that in a minute. They both speak to significant voices that we long for validation from. There's an interesting dynamic in David's family as it relates to his family dynamic, and in that family dynamic, there's some real dysfunction. And David never is affirmed or validated by his father or his brothers. Really encourage you, get an opportunity to take a look at 1 Samuel chapter 16 and check that out. And you see it pretty clearly. And so there's a yearning that David has for affirmation and validation. Likewise, when we are pressing toward reaching for something, we are going to look to specific voices sometimes, specific people to affirm us, to validate us, that we would think naturally would have our back. And I'm talking to people right now, you have dealt with the pushback and the blowback of people you thought would have your back as you began to move forward into your purpose. stepping into your destiny, and now all of a sudden there are the winds of criticism. I heard that, feel that strongly in my heart today, that is what you're experiencing. There are winds of criticism that are a strategic, they're a strategy rather. They're a strategy of the enemy. It's not just normal criticism, it's a strategy of the enemy, because some things are about to break through as you stay in your lane. The enemy's trying to work through the criticism of people you sought validation from to get you to step out of your lane, because there are, I want you to hear me, there are successes that are emerging as you stay in your lane. The convictions you carry, the gifts you have, and the gifts you've been working, and the strengths you possess are getting ready to break through for you in a way unlike you've seen. David is about to take out a giant who has defied a whole nation of people for a long time. He is a generational giant. This is a big deal. David's about to thoroughly strip Israel's greatest enemy and bring about a shift. And some of you are literally going to experience a shift in this season in your life. And so all of a sudden, you're dealing with criticism from people who are trying to talk you out of your lane. They're criticizing what you do. They're criticizing how you do it. They're criticizing your dream. There's some people right now, you're dealing with the backlash of having the legitimacy of your dream criticized. Like David's brother, like David had to experience from his brother, there are people you've gone to. You haven't asked for a handout, you've not asked for help, but you just thought that they would affirm you, and instead of affirmation, you got criticism, negative criticism. And God gave me a strong word. He said, do not let those who are criticizing you talk you out of where you are and what you're reaching for. In other words, do not let, I'm challenging you with this, I dare you, do not let the criticism you're experiencing deter your vision. Do not let it break your confidence in the convictions you carry about the direction you're headed. You need to know that God has consolidated some destiny in you, and you are in the process of walking it out. And the criticism is a unique strategy, because criticism has a way of deforming us. Words shape worlds. Positive speech creates positive outcomes. Negative speech creates negative outcomes. And there are seeds of doubt. If we're not careful, if we internalize the criticism of people we look to validation from and they don't validate us, if we're not careful, seeds of doubt that make us hesitant. And if we give in to hesitation, we get in a state of paralysis. And when that happens, you'll never drop your giant. When that happens, you won't drop your giant, but you will drop your dream. You won't drop your giant, but you will drop your purpose, your idea, your business. There are people that you've looked to for help in terms of just affirmation, and they've tried to just talk you out of it. Who do you think you are? That's the first criticism. And David pressed through it. He did something very powerful, and it's a strategy I want to give you. Build everything around your convictions. When you're dealing with the winds of criticism, you need to redirect your focus from the direction of the criticism by refusing to internalize it and reinforce the convictions you carry. Reinforce the convictions you carry. Now, by the convictions you carry, what I'm talking about is I'm talking about the things that you know. Each one of us inside of us has a knower. We have a place where we know. We have a place where we know better. In truth, we know better than the convictions, the criticisms we're enduring. We know better. We know better than the doubts and the accusations. See, with criticism comes accusation. Accusations like you're not good enough. Accusations like you're not ready. Accusations like your motives are wrong. All of that stuff that comes against us and begins to filter for our thoughts down into our emotions to try to get us to step back. And so we have a choice. Criticism has power to the extent that you internalize it. How do you not internalize it? How do you keep it from getting down into the system of your thoughts, your feelings, and your moods? The way you do that is you do what David did. You shift your attention, redirect what you're focusing on. You're either going to focus on the criticism or you're going to focus on your convictions. So pay attention to the knowings you carry. Let me ask you this. Before you began to deal with the winds of criticism, what were the convictions deep inside you knew? You knew your plan, your dream, your vision, your purpose, your idea, the things, some of you carry the knowings of God. God's dropped some things in you. God's revealed things to you. God has opened up pathways and purposes in the depths of your being, and you've begun to build your identity around them. See, one of the things criticism does is criticism wants to attack the legitimacy of our identity, because destiny and authority come out of identity. And so you've got to beat that back, and the only way you're going to do it is by being intentional about focusing on the convictions. Reinforce conviction, because out of conviction comes two very powerful things: confidence and courage. And so David does this. He refuses to argue with his brother. Instead, he keeps moving forward in the direction of his conviction. That is a strategy. It's literally a divine strategy. If you want a key from heaven to unlock the door to the purposes you carry, keep moving in the direction of your convictions. Refuse to move in the direction of your criticism. The other thing is, be practical about understanding that you're not obligated to argue with everybody. Arguing and convincing and changing the mind of your critics is not even your job. Your job is to build everything around your convictions and your strengths, trusting that God's got your back. And the results, I promise you, the results are going to speak for themselves. So David presses through the winds of criticism with his brother, and he gets an opportunity to come to Saul. And with Saul, the criticism gets elevated. You see, his brother's one type of influence and authority in his life. He's a relationship, a family connection that David wants to be able to have affirmation from. By the way, real quick before I move on, wrong people are never going to see what's right about you. Wrong people who have no assignment with where you're headed, people that don't have a place in your purpose, your future, your business, for those of you that are watching, you got ministry or whatnot calling on your life. There's some people that are with you for a season, but they're not with you long term. And so oftentimes what will happen is short-term people will begin to get critical when you step into the beginnings of moving forward into your greater purpose. I'm going to say that again because I really want you to grasp that. There are some people that are only in your life for a season, but when you begin to develop a relationship with them, you yearn for validation or affirmation. And what happens is, if we misinterpret their assignment in our life, we begin to try to build long-term strategy around our short-term situation. And when we do that, their criticism actually carries more weight with us than it should. It has a deforming influence or impact on us. And so you've got to be wise enough and pay attention to the fruit of behavior, character, motive, where they're coming from, because oftentimes as God begins to graduate you or move you into greater dimensions of your purpose, when your greater is opening up to you. Let me put it this way. When the door to your greater is beginning to open, that's when, right at the threshold of a new beginning, you're going to begin to encounter some unexpected criticism from directions you wouldn't have thought it would come from. And so as you focus on your convictions, you will succeed at overcoming the criticism. And then so what happens is now David is standing before Saul. And the first thing Saul says to David is, you can't. He begins to criticize David's vision. He criticizes David's confidence. He criticizes David's potential for success. And I'm talking to people right now that you've had some very authoritative figures in your life that have criticized and ridiculed your potential for success because they don't carry the convictions you carry. God has put some unshakable convictions in you, and even though criticism may be shaking you for a season, as you build everything around the convictions you carry, you're going to triumph over the criticisms you're enduring. It's very important. I want you to grasp that. Your confidence is going to come out of conviction. So conviction releases confidence, and the great thing about confidence is it actually reinforces conviction. So what is it that you know that's different than the criticism you're hearing? What are the things you carry deep in you that you know. I mean, you are persuaded. So faith is persuasion. Faith is the substance of things hoped for. The book of Hebrews says. So it literally means it's something tangible on the inside of you. That tangible thing produced by faith is conviction. It's knowing. In other words, David hears Saul saying, you can't. But David says inside, I know better. I know better. You have, in your knowing, you have a know better in you. You know better than the criticisms you're enduring. You know better than the integrity attack you're under. You know better than the false accusations you're dealing with. And so it's really imperative that you get this. And I want to remind you what I said at the onset of this conversation today. God put it strongly in me that criticism is a strategy of your enemy to get you to move out of your lane, to step out of your lane, because some successes are about to break through in the very place you're standing in. And so you cannot allow any critical voice to talk you into stepping out of your lane. Don't allow any critical voice to get you to step out of your lane. So when Saul can't convince David that David can't beat Goliath, Saul shifts his strategy and he puts his armor, or attempts to put his armor on David. He says, okay, since I can't criticize you into defeat, I'm going to try to dress you with defeat. That's a representative, a model of people putting their ideas on us, or people speaking out of their own dysfunctional identity to put their identity on us, which then limits our capacity to have victory and success and to create the things that you know in your knower, the confidences and the convictions you carry, to actually bring about the conquests of the purposes that God's called you to walk out in your business, in your life, in your marriage, in your family, in your church, whatever the ministry is that you are involved in. Listen, this works regardless of the field of endeavor you're in. Regardless of the field of endeavor. By the way, interesting thing, if you really want to do a pretty profound study, get into the Gospels and look at how much Jesus constantly had to press through criticism. And he constantly did it by reinforcing his conviction in who he was and what he'd been called to do. So it may even be practical for you to reinforce your focus on the mission that you carry. How long has it been since you revisited the mission you have? Especially when we're dealing with the winds of criticism, we get sucked into the temptation, if we're not careful, of wanting to change people's minds. And when we want to change people's minds, we become very vulnerable to changing our direction. And again, do not allow those voices to get you. That's the temptation. You may not see it as such, but I'm here today to tell you this is what you've been dealing with. It is a demonic strategy to get you to move out of the place of success. You're about to break through into the greater purposes you've been prepared for. You're about to break through into a new level of purpose, of living, of destiny, of opportunity. For a season, you've been like David. Even for years, some of you have been like David in that you've got purposes and potential, but very few people could see it. But you saw it, and you built everything around it, and now as you're getting ready to meet a moment that things are going to shift big time, you're struggling with the winds of criticism. See it as a satanic strategy to stop you from succeeding on a level unlike you ever have before. So you've got to absolutely reinforce your conviction about the things you know, and refuse to allow the half-truths of criticism to convince you that a lie is the truth. Criticism always carries a small element. It's not truth, but it will contain a half-truth, or a kernel of partial truth, or truth or deception dressed up as a half-truth, in order to suck you into playing that game. You can't play the game. You're either going to focus on the criticism, or you're going to focus on your convictions. And in your convictions, the things you carry, the knowings you possess, out of that place is where your successes are going to come from. strongly I need to impress upon you this today, that in the areas where God has convinced you of a thing, in the areas in you where God has made you know a thing, and it doesn't look or sound anything like the criticism you're experiencing, what you need to know is there is an authority in the things God has convinced you of. And if you will deal out of that place exclusively, if you'll deal out of that place exclusively and refuse to surrender to the criticism, so that because of a desire to please people, or of a desire to be affirmed by people that you're looking to for affirmation, you're going to have to be tough-minded, intentional, and very critical about refusing to surrender to that temptation. Because again, all of that is a satanic strategy to move you out of a place where successes are going to begin emerging from. You're about to break through into something you've never moved in. You're about to, some of you are about to come into some successes, even a series of successes that you've been sowing and reaching and pressing toward for years, and you're on the threshold of dropping some giants and taking some new territory in your life. You're at the threshold of some successes that you had been afraid would elude your grip, but you've been reaching out of that place of conviction. So don't you dare step out of the lane you're in. You can't step out of that lane because there's some successes that are coming there. The very strengths you're being criticized for are going to shift things for you. The very gifts and potential that very few have seen, but you've been convinced of it, and you carry a knowing that you are created for success. I'm here to tell you, you're not wrong. You are absolutely in the place you're supposed to be. You're on the right path. You're on target. You're in tune. You're in sync with the timing and the plans of heaven, and that's why the criticism that's been hitting your life at this season is so profound. Because the shifts that are going to come as you stay in your lane are going to be beyond your expectation. There are a group of people that God's been preparing to step into greater purposes, and the winds of criticism are an indication that you are making that shift. So Saul goes to put his armor on David. And I'm going to give you 5 strategies, and then I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you for your time today. I'm going to give you 5 things to actually do as strategies to employ tactically to reinforce the strategy of building everything around your convictions and strengths, trusting God to have your back, because the results are going to speak for themselves in your situation. So when Saul puts his armor on David, the scripture says that David hesitated. He put it on, but he hesitated. Why? He was feeling out if what somebody else was trying to put on him fit him. Very important. Very, very important. Anything that's assigned to your future, anything, any situation, any person who fits where you're headed, you don't have to force that situation to make it fit. If you've got to try to force it to make it fit, it doesn't. Let it go. If it doesn't fit, it's got to split. You can't hold on to something. You can't try to make something fit that doesn't. And let me tell you, criticism doesn't fit you. The criticisms that you've been experiencing don't fit you. Let them go. So I'm going to give you 5 strategies. David hesitated. Don't be in a hurry to feel like you got to make a right now decision by the pressure people are putting on you through their criticisms and their perspectives. By the way, don't allow anybody who's unqualified to speak into your life and to influence your thinking. Never give anybody who's unqualified, who hasn't been vetted and processed. Just because they have an opinion doesn't mean they have authority to speak into your life, to shape your opinion. The enemy works through criticism to negatively influence our thinking, because it's out of our thinking and our feeling that we make decisions. And there are destiny decisions that you're in the process of making out of the place of conviction you have, that the enemy wants to get in the mix through the criticism, through people, things that don't fit you. He's trying to force a fit upon your life. David hesitates. And he takes them off. He says, I can't go with these. I haven't proven them. I don't trust them. Trust your convictions. Trust what you know. Trust your gifts. Trust your strengths. Trust the things God has given you to do. Trust the things God's told you. Trust the voices that have legitimate authority in your life, that give you wisdom and counsel, that have a proven track record of being on target and having your back. And listen, sometimes you're going to feel all by yourself in that process. That's all right. God's got your back. You need to know that today. God's got your back when you're facing the winds of criticism. And you carry the convictions that are stronger than the criticisms that are coming against you. So don't be afraid to say, hey, look, this doesn't fit me. Don't be afraid to say, as it were, through your attitude and your actions to the winds of criticism you're enduring, hey, this doesn't fit me. In your self-talk, you've got to make a quality decision to say, you know what? I hear what they're saying, but that doesn't fit me. It doesn't fit me because it doesn't look like what God's been saying to me. It doesn't fit me because it doesn't look like my integrity. It doesn't fit me because it doesn't look like my character. It doesn't fit me because it doesn't look like my plan. I'm not going to be altered. Do not surrender your vision. Don't surrender your dreams. Don't surrender your convictions in the name of trying to make something fit that was never meant to. You will blow the purposes God wants to move you into. Now, you have that power. Saul's a king, but he can't make David. He can't force David to go in what doesn't fit him. The criticisms you've been enduring, if you throw them off and build around your convictions, they don't have the authority to force you into a particular mode of thought, path of decision-making, or direction with your life. You've got leverage even as you're enduring the winds of criticism. So David takes them off of him. He says, I can't go with these. I don't trust them. In this season, only pay attention to the voices you trust. There's a difference. We've heard the term, I've heard it all my life, the term of criticism being constructive. I want to flip that. I don't believe in constructive criticism. If it's criticism, it's not constructive. I do believe in corrective instruction. Corrective criticism or constructive criticism in itself by nature is destructive. There is a healthy place in our lives, and we all need accountability and people that can speak into our lives that we trust where they're coming from. David, in this scenario, doesn't have that. All he's got are the convictions God's put in him. And let me say this to you. Corrective instruction is wisdom, counsel, and perspective from people who you know in the depth of your being have your best interest in mind. And they may tell you what you don't want to hear, but in your gut, in the depth of your being, you know that even though it's not what you want to hear, it's what you need to hear. And there's a healthy place, and we all need people who can give us corrective instruction. But don't let the enemy convince you because you're looking for affirmation from certain people that their, quote, constructive criticism is that. It's not. Criticism is not constructive. And if it's not corrective instruction that empowers you, that enlarges you, that moves you on, that makes you better, that taps your potential, that reinforces your conviction, even though it has to add some correction and some right direction in your thinking. You know, their right voices make adjustments in our thinking and help us make shifts that we need to make because they can see what we can't see, but they don't deform us. They don't undo. They don't cast doubt over the convictions we carry. They just help build our skill set and enlarge our point of view. So there is a world of difference between constructive instruction or corrective instruction and constructive criticism, which I think we've made the case there's really no such thing. So David doesn't even have that. If you're in a place where you don't have corrective instructors, accountability partners, or voices, authoritative voices that have your back, that can speak in your life, just trust that the Spirit of God is going to protect you as you focus on your convictions. So David's using his convictions to say, this doesn't fit me, and he puts it off of him, and he goes in what he knows. He goes with what he knows. I'm gonna be done in a couple of minutes here. So thank you for your patience. You got to go with what you know. That's why you got to build everything around your convictions, your gifts, and your strengths. Your convictions, your gifts, and your strengths. Work your convictions, work your gifts, work your strengths, even in the presence of the critics, even in the midst of your criticism, the only way you're going to overcome the criticism is to go in what you know. Go with what you know. What David knew was that he could trust his slingshot. That's a type of a skill set that's been developed in private places where nobody's seen what you've been dealing with. It's the experiences God has given you. It's the wisdom God has consolidated and built in your life. It's the things that you know work. And I'm talking to people right now that you're enduring the winds of criticism, but in previous season, you followed the instructions God's given you. You've walked out the direction God's given you. You've built your life. You've built businesses. Some of you've built ministries. You've built marriages. You've built families. You're building dreams around convictions you've carried, and you've seen them succeed before, and I'm here to tell you they'll succeed again, so you got to go with what you know. Go with what you know, and refuse to allow criticism to get you to step out of your lane. You're about to break through into something very significant. It's going to become a game changer in your life. So I want to wrap this up by just giving you a couple of strategies or tactics as it relates to what David did, and they're going to work, because the purpose with what I'm about to give you as I wrap this up is to help reinforce your convictions and give you some tactics in which to employ so that you can succeed at the strategy in not surrendering to the voices of criticism and the winds of criticism that you're experiencing right now. Number one is keep doing what you do. As it relates to going in what you know, David knew a sling. David knew how to work a sling. David understood the power of simplicity. David knew he could trust his gift because he knew he was on target. Keep doing what you do. In fact, it's how good you are at what you do that's intimidating the enemy, that's moved him to criticize you, to try to get you to put down your weapons and take on his identity. The enemy's trying to talk you out of your gift. The enemy's trying to talk you out of your place of doing what you do. I'm here to tell you, not only don't step out of it, reinforce it. Keep doing what you do, knowing out of a place of conviction that success is coming. You want to talk about success? A teenage shepherd armed with nothing but a slingshot and 5 smooth stones kills a 9-foot-tall giant who'd never been defeated in battle before. A legend, a warrior king, as it were, who is a legend, who terrorized many nations. David doesn't stand a chance so far as the critics are concerned, but there's success in your gift, and there's successes ahead of you as long as you'll keep doing what you do. Number 2, summons the courage to go alone if you have to do it. Summons the courage to go alone if you have to. I'm talking to people right now, you feel like you're all by yourself in the direction you're stepping toward because of the level of criticism you're enduring. And I'm here to tell you, there are just some seasons we're going to feel like we're all by ourselves. You've got to summon the courage to go alone if you have to. David, nobody believes him. Nobody believes in him. Yet none of that can deform the confidence, the courage, or the conviction he carries that he was meant to win. Again, build everything around your convictions and summons the courage to go it alone if you have to. Number 3, go all in and don't look back. I dare you. Reinterpret the criticism you're experiencing. If it's not corrective instruction from a trusted voice in your life, and you know that it's criticism, I'm here to tell you, go all in and don't look back. The more you're criticized, the bolder you need to become. Go all in. Are you all in regard to the areas that you are convinced, in spite of the criticism, you're moving correctly in the right direction? Go all in and don't look back. Don't let anybody talk you out of going all in. Halfway, it gets you nowhere. Go all in and don't look back. Number 4, I mentioned this before, but I want to revisit it. It's very important. Be willing to walk away from anyone and anything that doesn't fit where you're headed. Be willing to walk away from anyone and anything that doesn't fit where you're headed the moment you realize they're not authorized to go with you. Because if you've got to try to force something to fit like Saul's armor, what happens then is we begin to redo who we are and how we do what we do. We redo it out of an effort to accommodate people that don't have what we have, that aren't headed where we're headed. Don't you dare sell out your business, your church, your purpose, your family, your dream. I'm talking to people right now that carry things in you haven't talked to other people about, and you're beginning to express it, and now there are some new connections and relationships that have recently formed in your life. Those people may not be, they may seem for a season like they're with you, but they may not be headed where you're headed. And as you begin to pick up on the fact that to make it work with them relationally, you're going to have to compromise. I'm here to tell you, do not compromise your purpose. If you've got to force it to fit, it doesn't. Let it go. If you've got to force it to fit, it doesn't fit at all, and it never will. The sooner you let that go, the sooner your successes will begin to emerge. So if it doesn't fit, you got to let it go. Number 5, let go of the need to have certain people understand what God's doing with you. There are just some people that are never going to get you. It is not your job to change their mind. It's your job to carry out the successes you've been called to give life to. Be kind, use wisdom, walk in love, walk in peace to the best of your ability, but it is not your job. You don't have an anointing to change people's minds, to make people who aren't headed where you're headed become convinced that what God's convinced you about is legitimate. There are just some things that you're going to have to be willing to walk away from as it relates to not surrendering to the temptation to feel like you've got to change your critics' minds. If people aren't authorized to go where you're headed, they're probably going to become very critical about what you're reaching for. If people aren't authorized to go where you're headed, they're going to probably become very critical about what you're reaching for. So I want to tell you this as I wrap this up. Your convictions carry authority to shift some things dramatically in your life. Build everything around them, even in the middle of the winds of the criticism you're facing. Your critics are not going to succeed, but you will if you refuse to surrender the convictions that you carry. It's been awesome to be able to share this with you today, and I appreciate you connecting here and trusting and believing that God's going to prove himself in your situation as you reach. Build everything around your convictions. Your critics are not going to win. Have a good afternoon.